Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Reading in the Dark. My name is Byron and I read sometimes. This video is going to be my mid-year wrap-up because it is, in fact, July and we're halfway through the year, which is crazy to me. But I'm going to be talking to you about Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, King's Sorrow by Joe Hill, Lone Women by Victor LaValle, The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, Ring Shout by Djèlí Clark, Ghost Summer Stories, an amazing short story collection by Tananarive, Blanche on the Lamb, and Blanche Among the Talented Tenth by Barbara Neely, Night Shift by Stephen King, All of Us Murderers by K.J. Charles, and An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. But before we get into that, I just really quick, I have to go conjure a dragon with my friends. It won't take, I'll just be right back. Okay, well, I did not think that sword was going to do that. Hi, welcome back. So this is Reading in the Dark and the mid-year wrap-up. There's a lot of books to get through. I want to jump right in to the first one, which I actually technically read in November, finished in the end of November 2025. I've read this blurb so many times, and I finally read it, so we're going to read this blurb one last time, and that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. After receiving a frantic letter from her newlywed cousin begging for someone to save her from a mysterious doom, Noemi Taboada heads to High Place, a distant house in the Mexican countryside. She's not sure what she will find, but she's also tough and smart, with an indomitable will, and she is not afraid. Not of her cousin's new husband, who is both menacing and alluring, not of his father, the ancient patriarch, and not even of the house itself, which begins to invade Noemi's dreams with visions of blood and doom. I wanted to love this. I gave it 3 stars. I thought this could be one of my favorite reads of the year, and it was a minute ago, so I had to kind of dive back into it to think about it, but I recall just not loving the main character at first, Noemi. She kind of gave privileged, rich, snobby, influencer girl vibes, sort of, but in contrast to the family and the staff at High Place, she was obviously the most likable character. And I heard a few other people say a similar thing, which was that this book was good. It was atmospheric, the twist was just weird enough to justify the horror tag, but it just didn't excite me. I don't know, it's a bizarre story, so to say I wasn't shocked maybe is a little bit crazy if you've read this, but I don't know, it just didn't jump off the page and wow me. And I hated the antagonist, the villain, I'm not going to tell you who it is. They were awful and terrible, and that's good, but I didn't love the protagonist, Noemi, enough to feel super passionate about her struggle against them, and I didn't love hating that protagonist or that antagonist. It was actually just annoying to read them for me. I don't know, sometimes we have to love hating them, right? For me, I didn't love hating them. Make of that what you will. I enjoyed the book, I liked it. If someone said you have to reread this, I'd be like, okay, fine. The next book I read was oh my god, one of them, King's Sorrow by Joe Hill. But before we get into all of that, if you have not already, remember to like and subscribe, because I have to say that, and if you do that, it helps, and it ensures that I will continue to put forth the effort to continue to make videos, which is something that I love to do, but the support is very, very welcome, I'll just put it that way. Arthur Oakes is a reader, a dreamer, and a student, but his idle and burgeoning romance with Gwen Underfoot is shattered when a local drug dealer and her partner corner him into one of the worst crimes he can imagine, stealing rare books from the college library. Arthur turns to his closest friends for comfort and help. Wealthy, irrepressible Colin Wren suggests using the unnerving Crane journal, bound in the skin of its author, to summon a dragon to do their bidding. The others don't hesitate to join Colin in an effort to smash reality and bring a creature of the impossible into our world. But there's nothing simple about dealing with dragons, and their pact to save Arthur becomes a terrifying bargain in which the 6 must choose a new sacrifice for King Sorrow every year, or become his next meal. This book, you guys, was 5 stars. I mean, I couldn't have loved it more. I was absolutely enthralled. I listened to this as an audiobook. It's kind of like a full cast audiobook. The primary narrator is Ari Fliakos. This book deserves its own review video. On Goodreads, 7 of the first 10 ratings are 5 stars. And the rating is 4.36. And on the Storygraph, the rating is 4.4. The ratings are very high for a reason. The world building in this book is incredible. It's world building on steroids. I just think it's really impressive when a writer weaves a bit of fantastical fiction into the real world so successfully. I mean, it all just felt so real, including the magical stuff. And that was made stronger by the novel taking place over the course of many years. Also, there's something about the conjuring of an imagined reality that is a fascinating take. They basically say, well, what if this was real? And if we do all the right things, then this thing that we're imagining that doesn't exist, that we made up, will just become real. I love this friend group so much. The writing of... Joe Hill is amazing at writing casts of characters. I felt that way in Nosferatu. I felt that way in The Fireman. It's amazing to me how he finds the right group to put together. I love the friend group. I appreciated some really thoughtful queer rep in this book. It deals with self-destructive behavior and self-loathing with those queer characters that then later leads to their growth and happiness, which was nice to read. I love the juxtaposition of spooky, elevated, supernatural, dark academia with gritty, real, trashy suffering of normal people. It felt like reading high fantasy and some of Stephen King's most deeply complicated and ambiguous characters, we'll say, all at the same time. It was really long. This audiobook was 26 hours long, but it felt justified. I will say the audiobook was a little odd to me. Ari Fliakos voiced the majority of the book and almost all of the characters, but then in some cases a different actor voiced those characters that we'd gotten to know through Ari Fliakos. So that was jarring to me. Maybe there was a method to this madness, but it wasn't clear to me. I would have preferred just one narrator the whole time. Anyway, Joe Hill is amazing. I loved Nosferatu. It was 5 stars. The Fireman was 4 stars, but could have been 5, really. I don't know, because I don't often love dystopian fiction, which is probably why that was 4. And this was just a solid 5 stars. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Lone Woman by Victor LaValle. Adelaide Henry carries an enormous steamer trunk with her wherever she goes. It's locked at all times, because when the trunk opens, people around Adelaide start to disappear. The year is 1915, and Adelaide is in trouble. Her secret sin killed her parents, forcing her to flee California in a hellfire rush and make her way to Montana as a homesteader. Dragging the trunk with her at every stop, she will become one of the lone women, taking advantage of the government's offer of free land for those who can tame it, except that Adelaide isn't alone. And the secret she's tried so desperately to lock away might be the only thing that will help her survive the harsh territory. Boy, did I love this book. I gave it 4 stars. Victor LaValle. I really enjoyed Victor LaValle's The Changeling and The Ballad of Black Tom. I've read one book of his every couple of years, and I always really enjoy the experience. I love the mystery behind the trunk. I love the historical aspect of this. I'm a kind of an historical fiction junkie in a way. I don't actually often read straight up historical fiction anymore, but anything that is sci-fi or, well, maybe not sci-fi, but horror or thriller or mystery that has an historical bent to it is gonna get me immediately, and this totally did. I love the mystery and the history and the history of the trunk and of the world. I like the historical aspect of reading about people moving west into the frontier, the sense of isolation and desolation. There's something beautiful about their experience of being out in the middle of the wilderness by themselves, and also something kind of terrifying. It reminded me of this movie I saw called The Wind, filmed by Emma Tammi, which I really, really liked. Has a low rating, but I thought was great. It's a cool movie. Check it out. Okay, so the reveal of the trunk in this book led to a very surprising twist for me that was super, super satisfying. And it was fascinating because it kept being revealed bit by bit. It wasn't like there was a twist and you found out the answer. It was you learned more and more as you went through, and her need to keep it under wraps just made you want to know more. So this book does deal with the topic of race. Obviously, it was set in 1915. But it's interesting. Race plays kind of a small part here. The struggle with all these people is against the elements, not each other, at least at first. It's just bubbling underneath. And of course, when things really get bad and dangerous, that racism comes out to just make everything worse and complicate things. So the combination of history and horror in a really tangible, immediate way was really, really cool. Victor LaValle is awesome. I super love this book. And then I listened to the audiobook of The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. The only other Ruth Ware I'd ever read was The Turn of the Key, which I did not love. But yeah, so The Woman in Cabin 10. Lo Blacklock, a journalist who writes for a travel magazine, has just been given the assignment of a lifetime. A week on a luxury cruise with only a handful of cabins. At first, Lowe's stay is nothing but pleasant. The cabins are plush, the dinner parties are sparkling, and the guests are elegant. But as the week wears on, frigid winds whip the deck, gray skies fall, and Lowe witnesses what she can only describe as a dark and terrifying nightmare. A woman being thrown overboard. The problem? All passengers remain accounted for, and so the ship sails on as if nothing has happened, despite Lowe's desperate attempts to convey that something or someone has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Okay, fine. Cool. Nice setup. I liked this book. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't love it. In the same way that I didn't love The Turn of the Key. Well, that's not true. Turn of the Key kind of lost me because some of the, tech elements of the security system, didn't make sense to me in a way that probably isn't relevant to most people. This one just I don't know. I wanted to give Ruth Ware another chance, but I had a rough time with the protagonist. I felt like her growth was super slow. This character struggles with being assertive and being strong because she goes through sort of a traumatic experience before the cruise, and she's very, very tender. She's very, very sensitive. She's in a not great place, and so as much as I completely and totally sympathized with her, it was hard to read. I don't know, the slowness of her gaining confidence makes a lot of sense in terms of the build and the tension, but it was kind of excruciating. It's probably fair and realistic, and in a way that's good writing, and I just didn't. It made it hard for me. I usually enjoy a slow build and a slow burn, but I was frustrated. I don't often say this, but I feel like it took far too long for the murder to happen. I was like, is something going to ever happen? And then I was like, finally, somebody's dead. Anyway, I liked the setting. The last few chapters were exciting. I enjoyed the reveal a lot. It surprised me. And again, I love the narrator, Imogen Church. She reads all of Ruth Ware's audiobooks, so that's something to look forward to. I think there's still hope for me and Ruth Ware. I haven't hated anything of hers that she's read. I just have never loved anything that I've read. Anyway, the next book I read was Ring Shout by P. Djèlí Clark. P. Djèlí Clark has some Egyptian steampunk stories that I read in Clockwork, Cairo, edited by Matthew Bright, and then I really enjoyed The Haunting of Tramcar 15. This is the first novel that P. Djèlí Clark has written that I have read. Ring Shout. In America, demons wear white hoods. In 1915, again, the birth of a nation cast a spell across America, swelling the Klan's ranks and drinking deep from the darkest thoughts of white folk. All across the nation they ride, spreading fear and violence among the vulnerable. They plan to bring hell to earth, but even Ku Kluxes can die. Standing in their way is Maurice Boudreau and her fellow resistance fighters, a foul-mouthed sharpshooter and a Harlem hellfighter. Armed with blade, bullet, and bomb, they hunt their hunters and send the Klan's demons straight to hell. But something awful's brewing in Macon, and the war on hell is about to heat up. Can Maurice stop the Klan before it ends the world? Another fabulous combination of history and supernatural horror. 4 stars. I zoomed through this one. I really thought the allegory for hate and how it twists and distorts people into monsters was awesome. The band of brilliant women were a very fun, cool ragtag group of people to follow. The final confrontation was thrilling and fun to read, and this book has an awesome final scene with a white woman who is finally starting to see the truth. And the way it's written is really, really impactful. It gave me chills. I had to put the book down. I had one of those moments. It was great. I will always read this author. P. Djèlí Clark, you are the greatest. He's amazing. The next book I read was a short story collection, or anthology, by Tananarive called Ghost Summer Stories. In her debut collection of short fiction, Dew takes us to Gracetown, a small Florida town that has both literal and figurative ghosts, into future scenarios that seem all too real, and provides empathetic portraits of those whose lives are touched by otherness. Yeah, wow. I do love a good short story collection. I gave this one 5 stars. It's one of my favorite collections of all time. Where to start? The Gracetown section, there's this old town that's kind of lorded over by this wealthy family that used to have like a plantation in the area. They have an historical link to slavery, and there's a lake there that will transform you if you swim in it in a certain kind of way. There are demons that will inhabit babies. You can't have a baby in this town during the summer. It's crazy, and I had a good time reading about it. Then there's a section called The Knowing, which is filled with special people who have abilities like psychics, werewolves. There were some really great stories in there too, especially about this woman who had the ability to see or to know when anybody was going to die. There's a section called Carriers, which is all about dystopian, like The Stand-esque, like virus-related dystopia. This virus has wiped out most of humanity, and there were several stories in that world that were great. I don't always love dystopian fiction, and I loved that whole section. And then the final section is called Vanishings, and that's filled with stories that deal with death, mortality, people leaving us. My favorite stories in this collection were The Lake, Summer, Ghost Summer, which is where this kid and his family like start kind of like staking out at night to try to like witness ghosts, and they learn a lot about like the disturbing history of the town in the process. We get some flashbacks. It's cool. Removal Order, which is about this woman who is stuck behind staying and caring for her mother who was really ill. So anyway, that story collection was amazing. I highly recommend it. She has another one called The Wishing Well, or The Wishing Tree, or The Wishing Spring, or something, that I bought immediately when I finished that collection because of how great it was, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So that collection was 5 stars. 5 stars, 5 stars. Tananarive do is queen. Blanche on the Lamb by Barbara Neely. This is book 1 of 4 in this collection. There are 4 books that are written by Barbara Neely, and she is no longer with us, so there will be no more. I read the first 2. The first one was called Blanche on the Lamb. Blanche White lends a refreshing African-American female twist to the mystery tradition as she turns from domestic worker to insightful if reluctant sleuth. A middle-aged housekeeper with a strong sense of humor, Blanche becomes an unlikely yet ingenious sleuth when murder disrupts the wealthy household of her employers. I loved this book. It was so charming. Everything I've been doing some good book choosing lately because there's so many 4 and 5 star reads on this list. This book was 5 stars. I adored it. Blanche White is the greatest character. She's so wise. She's such a charming person. I adored the character. I adored her relationship with Mumsfield. The lady of the house, Grace, this is her cousin. He's a 30-something-year-old man with Down syndrome. And he's very othered in a way that Blanche recognizes by everybody in the house. And they form a bond that's really, really nice. He irritates the family because he's the heir to the fortune. And Blanche feels some kind of way about that. She has some kinship with him due to how he's treated. But I also specifically liked how Blanche kind of has to get on herself and tell herself not to get too involved with Mumsfield in like a maternal sense. She cares for him, but she's wise enough and knows from experience not to get too close or to imagine like her loyalty to him will in some way be paid back because he can always be overpowered by somebody else's will. She's not part of the family, and she's learned that over time, and so as much as she cares about him, she has to keep him at arm's length, which she doesn't always succeed in doing. But it's a really interesting relationship to read about. It's just another part of what makes her a fascinating character. So that book was just charming, fun, and there's a lot of just like really great commentary about the relationship between white people and black people and what it's like to be a housekeeper and how people react to that. On that note, the second book is called Blanche Among the Talented Tenth by Barbara Neely. When Blanche White moved north to Boston, she believed it would be a better place to raise her kids, especially after she got them into an elite private school. But now her children are becoming elitist and judgmental, acquiring more attitude than education. So, when she and her kids are invited to Amber Cove, an exclusive resort in Maine for wealthy blacks, Blanche jumps at the chance to see how the other half lives and maybe stop her kids from turning into people she doesn't want to know. When one of the guests kills himself and another is electrocuted in her bathtub, Blanche becomes an accidental detective once again, using her sharp wit and keen social insight to peel back some disturbing color and class distinctions within the black community that may have driven someone to murder. I liked this one. I did not love it as much. I gave it 3 stars. It's still Blanche, and I'll read this character in anything. I enjoyed it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. It took a long time to get through this for me, for some reason, and there were days that went by without it, and I would have to go back and listen to more parts. Both of these, by the way, I listen to as audiobooks, so I listen to them in my car or on my way to and from work. They're great audiobooks. They're read by an actress named Lisa Renee Pitts. But yeah, so I enjoyed this one. It was still charming as hell. Anything that Blanche White is in, I'm going to read. I enjoyed her tumultuous relationship with Maddie, this slightly snobbish but brilliant older woman, kind of set in her ways. We don't always see eye to eye, especially in the beginning, especially on issues of like the colorism in the community and class, but she becomes an ally to Blanche in the second half of the book. The setting at Amber Cove and sort of the cast of characters, for whatever reason, and this sometimes happens and it's just me, it was hard to keep them straight in my head. But the book is filled with so much great commentary on colorism and all of that stuff. Like Barbara Neely was laying down lots of insight. And the mystery is fine. I can't say I had the greatest time reading this one. It was a little complicated. Well, it might not really be that complicated. My experience of it was that I felt like it was complicated and I was confused. I might have just been a little bit of a dolt during this time. I don't know. There was a user on Goodreads named Udeni, who said, quote, "There is a rage that brings this book a certain darkness. I felt quite drained after finishing it." And that I would agree with that. I felt the same way. Yeah, it wasn't as bouncy and light and charming as the first one to me. Not all completely in a bad way, but it just didn't have the same like sparkle to it that the first one did for me. Most people rate this one higher, so I don't know. Primarily spending time with Blanche White, gleaning insight into her views is the joy of this series, and that was all intact here, so I enjoyed it and I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was Night Shift by Stephen King. Finally, I read this book over the course of about 9 months. For no particular reason, I kept having to go back and reread things because I kept putting it on hold for reasons that had nothing to do with the quality of the stories. Anyway, Night Shift. There's a blurb here. I mean, it's a short story collection. Stephen King's first collection. In these 20 stories, we see mutated rats gone bad, a cataclysmic virus that threatens humanity, a smoker who will try anything to stop, a reclusive alcoholic who begins a gruesome transformation, and many more. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I love short stories, and a lot of these are classics now, or have been adapted into film, like The Mangler, The Boogeyman. There's a story called Trucks that was turned into the crazy movie Maximum Overdrive, which I still have not seen, but have watched videos about and heard about. I think Stephen King directed that one. The Lawnmower Man, Children of the Corn. My favorite stories in this were Graveyard Shift, which is about some mill workers who are assisting in cleaning out the sub-basement under this factory, who discover some long isolated areas inhabited by crazy mutated creatures like mutated bats and rodents, etc. There's this like very creepy sci-fi story called I Am the Doorway about the results of an astronaut who inadvertently makes contact with aliens and whose body then starts to transform in grotesque ways. It reminded me of Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Sometimes They Come Back, which is about a man who was is living as an adult traumatized by the memory of his younger brother being killed by bullies when they were kids. This guy is now a high school teacher, and students in his class start dying. And then they are being replaced by new students that are moving in from out of town that are the same bullies from when he was a kid that killed his brother. They start showing up as students in his class. They have not aged. They're still kids. And he resorts to some dark magic to deal with them. And him dealing with that memory and with the childhood trauma of it all was made for a really riveting read. There were a lot of stories in that collection. Those are the ones that I love the most. It's a great collection, and I gave it 4 stars. All of Us Murderers by K.J. Charles. This is a male mystery romance. When Zeb Wickham is summoned to a wealthy relative's remote Gothic manor, he is horrified to find all the people he least wants to see in the world. His estranged brother, his sneering cousin, and his bitter ex-lover Gideon Grey. Things couldn't possibly get worse. Then, the master of the house announces the true purpose of the gathering. He intends to leave the vast family fortune to whoever marries his young ward, setting off a violent scramble for her hand. As the Dartmoor mists roll in, there's no way out, and something unnatural may be watching them from the house's shadowy depths. Fear and paranoia ramping ever higher, Zeb has nowhere to turn, but to the man who once held his heart. As the gaslight flickers and terror takes hold, can 2 warring lovers reunite, uncover the murderous mysteries of Lackaday House, and live to tell the tale? Can we? I don't know. Well, I do know because I read it. I like this book. I gave it 4 stars. I love the house. I love the cast of characters. You know, whenever you have like a closed circle situation, the cast of characters, the people that are gathering for dinner every night, that kind of thing is very important. And this cast was great. I enjoyed hating them. I really liked the main character, Zeb. He reminded me a lot of this very timid poet character on Murder. In fact, actually, there's 2 different episodes of Murder, She Wrote with a timid, shy poet. And he reminded me of both of them. The tumultuous backstory for Zeb and Gideon. It was nice to read about 2 men discussing their relationship and where things went wrong, and the power dynamic between them that contributed to things going wrong. All of that rang really true. I felt like the sort of pathology of their romantic disintegration rang true and was really plausible. It also feeds nicely into their roles with one another sexually. That said, I don't know. I feel like the discussion about what happened in their relationship, once they start to talk, kind of goes on for a long time, and it sort of felt like they were repeating themselves quite a bit. Like the air's being cleared, and being cleared, and being cleared, and the reconciliation, which does happen, because it is a romance, that's not a spoiler. It just feels a little abrupt to me, maybe a little too easy. The sex scenes were fine. They felt like they were written by a woman, not a gay man, for female readers, which is not necessarily a problem. But they were nice, and they were there, and the relationship, for the most part, really rang true and was satisfying to watch the progression of. The atmosphere, the characters, the queer rep, it was all great. Yeah, All of Us Martyrs by K.J. Charles. And then my final read, the last thing I finished, and I swear I'm about to finish like 3 books all at the same time right now, but the last book I finished, An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. I've been a big fan of this author for a long time. The first book of theirs that I read was Sorrowland, and then I read some of their short stories and Model Home, which I think I liked better than most people did. So I'm a big fan of Rivers Solomon, and this is a book that was being talked about a lot a few years ago that I never read, and I was really looking forward to it. So I'm super glad that I finally got to it. Aster has little to offer folks in the way of rebuttal when they call her ogre and freak. She's used to the names. She only wishes there was more truth to them. If she were truly a monster, she'd be powerful enough to tear down the walls around her until nothing remains of her world. Aster lives in the low-deck slums of the HSS Matilda, a space vessel organized much like the antebellum South. For generations, Matilda has ferried the last of humanity to a mythical promised land. On its way, the ship's leaders have imposed harsh moral restrictions and deep indignities on dark-skinned sharecroppers like Aster. Embroiled in a grudge with a brutal overseer, Aster learns there may be a way to improve her lot if she's willing to sow the seeds of civil war. Holy crap, this book is like a whole world that I didn't know that I needed to live in. 5 stars. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely adored it. River Solomon is the GOAT. River Solomon is amazing. I have yet to read anything that they've written that I didn't adore. This might be my first 5-star read by them, but it's all been good. The world building in this story is amazing. It's really, truly a fascinating take on distant future humanity, having lost touch with like the whole point of their journey to find a suitable planet. And like a whole economy and religion and political sphere has grown in place on this ship. That is super like not great for the people in the lower decks. It's a depressing take, but sadly plausible. It very much feels like this is what would happen. You know, racism is rampant and just like accepted, like this rigid class system are in place. The allegory of those of a lower class being represented by the fact that they live in the lower decks, which is intentional in this community as well, is really effective, but it doesn't like really hammer you over the head either. This is just the way this community is set up. Those in power, you know, they're more interested in maintaining the status quo for themselves than in finding a home for humanity or having anything to do with honoring human dignity. Which is not to say that all of them are terrible. There are people who are decent, and some of them are not even in the lower decks, which is nice and is an important part of the story and how Aster does what she does. It's powerful, and it obviously brings to mind like enslaved people rowing slave ships, which is, I mean, there's a lot that's dark in this story. This character goes through it, but you get the sense that they've been going through it their whole life, so like they're kind of unfazed. Aster is also interesting because she's a very emotionally detached person, which I think also kind of lends authenticity to the fact of her lifelong suffering. She's a fascinating character. She's not perfect, and she's not really kind either. She's often really, really blunt and not thinking about how what she says is going to affect people, but she's generally right, and she is always doing what she's doing from a sense of being deeply good, but it's tough, and yet Aster is such a magnetic force of a character. It's not too oppressive. You're able to survive it because of Aster's strength. This is a really insightful depiction of class struggle, systematized racism combined with dystopia, adjacent sci-fi vibes. It's just fire. This book is amazing. I would read 10 books in a series set in this world. Something that will never happen, but still, loved it. And so that is it. Those were all of the books that I have read in 2026 and like a tiny bit of the end of 2025. Thank you so much for watching this video and for being here. If you read any of the books that I just mentioned, let me know what you think. Did you feel the same way that I did? Do you think I'm an idiot? The comment box below is your friend. I will be happy to read your comments. I love hearing from you guys. So without any further ado, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, comment below. And until next time, I will be here in the dark, reading now. I'm gonna go, I guess I have to feed that dragon, so I'm gonna go do that. Okay, goodbye.